Hi, I'm Rolf Perelius with Shooter's Paradise. We occasionally hear people make comments that one shouldn't get training because then the court will hold you to your training and expect you to act as you were trained to act. And it's better not to know so that then they can't hold you to that standard. We occasionally hear these things, and quite frankly, while that may be true, that the prosecutor might say, well, if you had this training, you should have known this thing, there's a far bigger danger. So I'd like to take a look at that. It's very likely that a prosecutor will say you were trained thus and so, you knew what the law was, and therefore you have no excuse for not comporting yourself within the bounds of the law. That's absolutely correct. But they will 100% hold you accountable if what you did is illegal. If what you did doesn't fall within the bounds of self-defense law, they absolutely will hold you accountable for that, because ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially when you're talking about big charges like murder charges, a homicide charge. So it is far better, far better to know what the law says in regards to self-defense so that I can set myself up so I don't do something that is clearly illegal, i.e. clearly murder, and I do something that my attorney can argue for me in a court of law was reasonable in those circumstances, and therefore then not get that punishment. That's far superior. So while it is true that my knowledge of self-defense law can be used against me in court, you got to consider this. A prosecutor looking to put me away and hold me accountable for that crime is going to use everything against me. They'll use everything against me. The color of the shirt I had on will be used against me. They're going to use everything against me. So the answer to that is always, well, could they use that against you? Yes, of course they could. They're going to try everything. So it's pretty, I would say the trade-off is pretty obvious. I would use the term foolish. It's foolish to think that I can hide behind my ignorance in what is appropriate to do in self-defense and what's not. I think that's a pretty foolish stance to take, because if you have done something that meets the requirements for being illegal activity and somebody dies from your actions, you're looking at a homicide charge and you don't stand a chance. If the witness statements and the evidence show that you did something that was clearly what the law defines as murder, then it's going to be you'll have a miracle on your hands if you don't go to prison for the rest of your life. Whereas if you know what the law says and your actions don't quite line up exactly with it, you're not going to be facing the same thing. It's not even going to be in the same ballpark. And oftentimes we see people who make real good faith efforts to comport themselves within the bounds of the law and what a good moral person would do. We see them actually get cut a little slack. A weapons charge that normally they would tack on, they'll just ignore that. That kind of thing happens. Don't count on that. Absolutely don't count on it. But what I'm saying is, it's exceedingly foolish to think that I can claim, well, I didn't know that I couldn't do thus and so, which is clearly murder. That's just a very foolish argument. And I would tack on to this that what we think is right when it comes to self-defense usually is not legal. What the legal definition of what self-defense is, what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, oftentimes comes as a shock to a person who's never looked into that aspect of law before. I would strongly recommend that you do a little research and look into it. We have a Patreon page. There's a whole bunch of information about law and self-defense, and it is specific. A lot of it is specific to Louisiana. You can go there and get the starter for an education for practically nothing. I strongly recommend that you get training from somebody. Get some training. If you think there's a possibility that at one point or another in your life you might use force against another person, it is cheap insurance to take a class on a day. $100, $200. Invest that money and find out, oh, I didn't know that. I won't be doing that thing, and stay out of prison for the rest of your life. It's cheap insurance, if you would, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. And what I think the law should be in regards to self-defense is often not the case. Anyway, so I just wanted to go over that with you. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your time.